Coming up, as the temperature continues to climb, so does the number of trips to the lake. We talked with park rangers about how to stay safe on the water this summer. And a group of bikers revved up their engines and hit the roads this weekend to lend a hand to a good cause. Plus, one cemetery is adding a little extra to their Memorial Day program by honoring the men and women who served in one of World War II's toughest battles.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News This Morning.
Good morning. It is 5:28 on this Monday morning. It's the 27th of May. Thank you for tuning in to Mountain News This Morning. I'm Will Puckett. Well, it was a stormy night for many of you, and for those of you who are watching, some of your neighbors might be without power this morning because of some strong winds and storms that moved through the region. But this morning, all's clear and all's well to end. It ends well. But it's going to be hot, and it's going to be humid. It's going to be that way for a handful of days. So let's bring Brandon in this morning as he brings us some hopefully good news, Brandon, of what can many expect as they wrap up their Memorial Day weekend.
That's right. I was just checking some power outage numbers real quick. Still 4,000 out across a big chunk of the area on Kentucky Power. So like you said, a lot of our neighbors in the dark this morning, but everything's quiet now. Things are looking much better as we head deeper into the forecast. We take a look real quick at US 119 up on top of Whitesburg Pine Mountain. Things are pretty quiet there. Satellite radar for the last few hours, pretty quiet. And then we see that weather app forecast is going to feature humid conditions, but cloudy skies early will keep us from getting as hot today. Only about 86 for a daytime high. Full forecast on the way in just a few minutes. Will?
All righty, Brandon, thank you. Well, 16 World War II veterans are crossing the Atlantic on this Memorial Day, traveling to Europe. They'll take part in activities in France to mark the 75th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. They share their painful memories with CBS News correspondent Wendy Gillette before departing New York.
The bullets are all around me, and no bullet found my name.
Nearly 75 years ago, Frank DeVita landed on Omaha Beach in Normandy, France on D-Day and witnessed his comrades falling around him.
Why am I alive and they're dead? Why? I don't know. I've had a guilty conscience my whole life.
He was just 19 years old. Today, he's 94. He only started talking about what he witnessed 5 years ago.
They were 18, 19, 20 years old. They were too young to drink. They were too young to vote. But they weren't too young to die.
99-year-old Steve Melnikoff also survived the invasion that began the liberation of Western Europe from the Nazis. He was shot in the neck 11 days later, but after treatment, returned to fight.
I'm a combat infantryman. I was there at the beginning. I was there the whole time. I was there at the end of the war. I was in combat 335 days.
They're part of a group of 16 World War II veterans sailing aboard the Queen Mary II this week. The veterans are traveling from Brooklyn, New York to England on their 7-night transatlantic journey. The men will head to Normandy to take part in events to mark the 75th anniversary of D-Day on June 6th and to honor the more than 400,000 Americans who died in the war.
People say to me, "You're a hero." I said, "I'm not a hero." I said, "Those guys in the grave, they're my heroes. They gave their life for their country."
They may not consider themselves heroes, but the greatest generation fought to secure freedom for generations to come. Wendy Gillette, CBS News, Brooklyn, New York.
The ship's operator, Cunard, had an important role during World War II. The liners Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth transported more than 1.5 million servicemen across the Atlantic. Well, Camp Nelson National Cemetery will hold its annual Memorial Day program later today, and this year it will honor the men and women who served in World War II in one of its toughest battles. This December will mark the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge in the winter of 1944. This year's keynote speaker is 96-year-old Central Kentuckian who remembers every second of that cold and deadly battle. Amber Philpott has this story.
All right. He might be a little slower in pace, but his workload certainly doesn't reflect it. Every day, just like clockwork, Captain Walter Cox shows up to the office.
I came out of retirement. I tried retirement and played golf every day, and I didn't like it, and so I decided to go back to work.
At 96 years young, he's the man to talk to about a trust or a will. An attorney for most of his career, he opened his own practice focusing on this line of work in 2004. He says it keeps him young.
Well, my advice to everybody is to keep working, and I think that's what's kept me alive. You got to exercise your brain as well as your body.
Cox is the keynote speaker this Memorial Day at Camp Nelson. If you ask him about the honor, his sense of humor is evident.
I think that I'm probably the oldest one they knew about that could still get up and stand up and speak.
It's been more than 7 decades since Cox was called into duty. A UKROTC student, he got the call in April of 1943 to head to basic training. That next year, he was sent with the 70th Infantry, arriving in France ahead of one of the greatest battles of World War II.
We were en route in our 48s when the Battle of the Bulge started, and it started further north. So it was going on while we were en route up to Strasbourg.
He and his men arrived Christmas Day, 1944. He recalls what he told his men as if it were yesterday.
I believed that the Lord's going to take care of us. So I told my men, I had 40 men, I was a platoon leader, and on Christmas Day I took them all in church, there, a little Catholic church in the town of Buchweiler, France. And I told them all that their job was to protect themselves as well as kill all the Germans.
Cox and his men fought in some of the most brutal conditions. The cold and snow, just another enemy in itself.
Shoes were the main things. Your feet would freeze if you didn't take off your shoes, change your socks. Your buddy, you always have a buddy with you, and he massages your feet, get the feeling back in them, put on the warm socks.
In January, Cox and his men succeeded in stopping the Germans and freed several prisoners. At 22 years old, he and his men earned a battalion citation from the president.
A lot of people died, and a lot of people, I was lucky. Like I write my book, no doubt I love my angel because I know I was protected by an angel.
Cox went on to attain the rank of captain, serve in the JAG Corps, and eventually return home to the Bluegrass to start a family and his career outside the military. He's written his life story down in this book, I Love My Angel, a way to preserve the memories of his 96 years. There aren't many left of his generation, so maybe it's why he's still hard at work, a way to honor those that didn't get the chance to be here with him, celebrating Memorial Day 75 years later.
It's a great honor. And given my age and given my health, the Lord has blessed me, and I thank Him for it.
We need to continue to treasure every single one of that generation that we can. Now, Captain Cox says he spent 40 months in the United States Army. He says he doesn't know how he made it through, but believes in that angel that saw him to the end. The ceremony at Camp Nelson starts at 11 today. Weather permitting, there will be a flyover of a restored Mitchell B-25 bomber, one of less than 10 still flying.